All right, so hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive with us.
Yeah, glad to be back.
And today we're going to be looking at something pretty massive, I think you could say,
Definitely.
the future of humanity as it relates to AI,
Mm,
artificial intelligence.
big topic.
Huge, huge topic. We've got a really fascinating collection of essays we're going to be pulling from today.
Yeah, some really thought-provoking stuff in here.
Really looking at how AI could change the way we work, how economies function, even just daily life, day-to-day stuff.
Absolutely, like the nuts and bolts of how we live could be impacted.
Yeah, and so for this deep dive, we always try to kind of cut through the noise a little bit.
Right, get past the hype.
Yeah, get past the hype, get past maybe some of the fears as well,
Yeah.
anxieties,
Yeah,
and really try to understand what are the big shifts, the big transformations that are potentially on the horizon here.
right, because the potential is massive in both positive and maybe some, not so positive ways.
Exactly. Yeah. So, I wanted to just throw this out there to start to all of you listening. Have you ever really sat down and thought about what work even means in a future where AI is calling a lot of the shots?
It's a fundamental question, right? I mean, so much of how we define ourselves, how society is structured, it all goes back to the idea of work.
Totally.
And that's one of the things that just jumps out from these essays, how they really dig into that long-standing link between human labor, like the actual skills and time we put in, and the way our economic systems work.
Yeah.
It's always been this exchange. You offer your abilities, you get compensated,
Yeah.
and that lets you get the things you need,
Yeah.
participate in the whole system.
Right. It's that idea that our effort equals value, and then that value is what gives us access to everything else.
Exactly.
But then AI comes along, and suddenly you have these systems that can do tasks often way more efficiently than we can. Faster, cheaper, no breaks needed, no human error, all that.
It's a whole different ball game.
Yeah, yeah, it really is. In fact, one of the essays actually cited the McKinsey Global Institute. They're a pretty big research firm, and they're projecting some serious boosts to productivity and economic growth thanks to AI and automation.
Which makes sense on the surface.
Sure, sure.
But it does make you wonder, if machines can do more and more of the jobs that people rely on for their livelihood,
Mm-hmm.
what happens to the value of those human skills?
Yeah, what does that equation look like for you if your skills aren't as in demand?
Exactly.
Yeah. And that leads to, I think, one of the most interesting and maybe even kind of paradoxical points that a lot of these essays brought up.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
So think about this. If AI takes over most of the work, we could potentially have this abundance of goods and services, right? Like way more than we've ever seen before.
In theory, yeah, if the AI is that productive.
Right. But here's the catch. If human jobs are disappearing left and right, where's the income going to come from for people to actually buy all that stuff the AI is churning out?
Ah, okay, yeah, the demand side of the equation.
Yeah. Exactly. One of the essays used this really simple example talking about the beer industry.
Okay, I like where this is going.
So picture this. AI is making the perfect beer super efficiently, like the best beer you've ever had. Tons of it.
Sounds pretty so far.
Right. But if everyone who used to work in breweries, delivery, pubs, all that is now out of a job, no income.
Then who's buying all that amazing AI beer?
Right. What's the point of all that production? And that's the paradox. Abundance on one side, but potential lack of access on the other.
It's a classic problem of distribution, just taken to a whole new level.
Yeah, exactly. And it really gets you thinking, how do we solve for that? And thankfully, these essays do offer some potential solutions, things that are being seriously discussed right now.
Okay, good, because I was going to say that's a pretty big cliffhanger.
Oh, yeah. So one of the most common ideas is universal basic income, or UBI, as a lot of folks call it.
Right, I've heard of that.
Basically, it's this idea of giving everyone a regular payment, no strings attached, whether they're working or not.
So like a safety net, to make sure everyone has at least some income, even if traditional jobs are scarce.
Exactly. That's the core concept. Now, of course, there are tons of debates about how to fund it, how to make it sustainable.
Right, because you can't just magic money out of thin air.
Right. And those are important discussions to have, for sure. But the fundamental idea is to kind of decouple income from traditional employment.
Interesting.
And some thinkers, like Elon Musk, he's a big proponent of this, actually take it a step further.
Oh, so.
He talks about what he calls universal high income.
Okay, that sounds pretty utopian.
It does, right. The idea is if AI can create so much abundance, maybe everyone can have a significantly higher standard of living, even without working in the traditional sense.
So traditional jobs become optional, basically.
That's the idea, yeah. Now, whether that's achievable or not, that's a whole other
Got a
conversation.
lot of ifs and buts there.
For sure, for sure. But I think the key takeaway here is whether it's UBI, universal high income, or some other model we haven't even thought of yet, these alternative economic frameworks are ways to ensure that even in an AI-dominated world, people can still access and benefit from all that production.
It's like we need to reinvent the whole system of exchange, really.
Yeah, and it's not just about the economics of it, right? It's about what our lives would actually look like.
Okay, yeah. Paint me a picture.
So imagine you, the listener. AI is handling all those tedious, repetitive tasks, those jobs that maybe a lot of people don't find fulfilling anyway.
Okay, yeah, I can see that.
Think about all the free time you'd have. What would you do with it? What passions could you finally pursue? What creative projects would you have the space for?
It's almost like a blank slate, right?
Yeah, in a way.
Okay.
And these essays really highlight that potential liberation from traditional work constraints.
But it's not all sunshine and roses, is it? I mean, what happens to our sense of purpose, our identity? For a lot of us, that's tied up in our work.
That's a huge point, and the essays don't shy away from that at all.
Yeah, because if work isn't defining us anymore, what does? That's a pretty existential question.
It is, and it's something we'd all have to grapple with, individually and as a society.
And I imagine there are plenty of people out there who are both excited and terrified by that prospect.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, the essays mention a lot of online discussions, on Reddit and places like that, where people are really wrestling with these ideas.
Which makes sense. It's a huge unknown.
Yeah, and some of the concerns are pretty valid, like would we become too passive, too reliant on AI to do
Like,
everything?
could we lose our motivation, our drive to achieve things?
Exactly. And then there's another, maybe even darker side to consider, which some of the essays brought up.
Okay, lay it on me.
What about the potential for new forms of inequality? Like if control of AI and all its resources ends up concentrated in the hands of a few.
Oh, so you have a small elite benefiting from AI while everyone else is dependent on them.
Exactly. It's almost like a new feudal system in a way.
Yeah, that's a pretty dystopian scenario.
It is, and it's something we need to be very aware of, right? Because these technologies are powerful and we need to make sure they're used responsibly.
Well, the good news is these essays do offer some ideas on how to avoid those negative outcomes.
They do, yeah. And I think it starts with acknowledging that the future isn't predetermined, right? We have agency, we can shape how this all unfolds.
Absolutely. And those inclusive economic policies, like UBI, are definitely part of the solution.
For sure, but it goes beyond that too. The essays really emphasize the importance of lifelong learning, of being adaptable.
Right, because if the nature of work is constantly changing, we need to be able to keep up, to learn new skills, find new ways to contribute.
Exactly, and it's not just about individuals either. Strong communities, social engagement, those are crucial as well.
Yeah, because if traditional workplaces are disappearing, we need to find new ways to connect, to build those social bonds.
Totally. And then, maybe most importantly, we need to have clear ethical guidelines, oversight over how AI is developed and used.
To make sure it serves everyone, not just a select few.
Exactly. And that's something all of you listening need to be thinking about too, because this is your future we're talking about.
It's our collective future, really.
It is, yeah. So, as we kind of wrap up this deep dive into the world of AI and its potential impact, I think the takeaway is this. We're on the verge of a truly massive transformation.
A transformation that will touch every part of our lives.
Yeah, from how we earn a living to how we spend our time to what we value as individuals and as a society.
And the old ways of doing things, they're being challenged in a big way.
They are, but it's not all doom and gloom, right? I mean, this also presents amazing opportunities for progress, for redefining what it means to live a meaningful life.
Absolutely, and that's what makes this whole conversation so exciting, even if it's a little daunting at times.
It is, yeah. And the key point, I think, is that we can't afford to be passive. We have to be active participants in shaping this future.
Through smart policies, ethical considerations, and a willingness to adapt.
Exactly. So, to end on a bit of a thought-provoking note, for all of you out there listening, what do you think will be the most valuable human skill, the most important attribute in a world where intelligence isn't solely a human trait anymore?
I'll be pondering that one for sure.
Me too. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, everyone, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time.
Bye.